Thanks to COVID-19 and now the new Hong Kong's new national security law, the protest movement here in Hong Kong that started last year has really had to make some adjustments. And from the outside, it might look as if things have gotten very quiet and the protest has been silenced. But the reality is that that's certainly not true. Over the course of 2020, there's been a number of times in which people have stood up to the restrictions that have been put on them for protesting, have braved the possibility of criminal prosecution for under the broad national security law, to come out and protest various things, to protest the restrictions on public gatherings, to commemorate the tragedy of June 4th, and to protest the national security law. And each time they've done this, the police have responded with very heavy-handed response, and people are not protesting quite as frequently as they did in 2019, but they are still out there, still protesting.
Nel documentario vedremo un movimento molto sfaccettato che è unito dietro delle rivendicazioni comuni e rimane insieme, si mobilita nonostante le numerose sfide. È probabile che un movimento simile altrove non avrebbe resistito. Come mai a Hong Kong si è riusciti ad unirsi e a continuare a lottare nonostante le difficoltà e le differenze?
I think that what keeps Hong Kongers committed in the face of all of this adversity is really the relative simplicity of their fundamental objectives and demands here, which are really to preserve the rights and freedoms that many people see as being an intrinsic part of their identity as Hong Kong people, as well as the demand that there be at least minimal accountability from their government. And the simplicity, the basic nature of these objectives also, I think, accounts for the diversity of the protest movement, or the support for the protest movement. We've seen people from all walks of life, from all age groups. I mean, last year there was a protest attended by almost 2 million people, which is a quarter of the population of the entire city. So I think that it's the simplicity of those demands and those expectations, combined with the fact that the government continues to balk at answering them, that has kept this spirit of protest alive in the face of the many kinds of adversity that it's faced.
Lei e i colleghi di Amnesty dell'ufficio di Hong Kong avete iniziato a monitorare la situazione nella primavera del 2019 e ancora prima, quando è iniziato il movimento, e state ancora portando avanti questo importante lavoro di monitoraggio. Quali sono le principali preoccupazioni in termini di diritti umani?
Well, for Amnesty, I think there are two main and interlinked human rights concerns that we're still looking at with respect to Hong Kong. The first is the need for an independent and impartial and effective investigation into the use of force by law enforcement in the policing of protests. The longer that Hong Kong goes without some real basic accountability for the way that the protests were handled in 2019, I think the more that the police here are being emboldened by this idea that they can simply act with impunity, and the rift, I guess, or the wound that exists in society between the people and their government, it just continues to fester. And of course, the second thing that Amnesty remains concerned about is we have serious human rights concerns around Hong Kong's new national security law. Since the very moment that law took effect, the police have been taking advantage of the vague way in which national security crimes, such as inciting secession or colluding with foreign forces, are defined, and using this law to arrest people. And it's caused, not only is it very problematic from the way that the law is being enforced, but simply the fact that this law exists, and it has created a very serious chilling effect on the ability and right for people to engage in protest and free expression here in Hong Kong. So I think going forward, these are things that Amnesty is going to have to continue to look at.
A proposito della legge sulla sicurezza nazionale, qual è l'impatto di questa legge sui cittadini comuni di Hong Kong, quelli che non sono per forza attivisti?
Well, I mean, the fact that the protests, that so many Hong Kong people supported the protests in one form or another over the course of 2019 really has to be recognized, so that even people who are not engaged in going out in the streets on a daily basis, the protests touch people's lives in many ways over the course of the past year. And the chilling effect of the national security law really had an immediate effect. It had an impact on people's daily lives even before the law was enacted. You saw people who were very uncertain about how the law would be enforced and what might be considered to be a criminal offense under this law. They're going to their social media pages and scrubbing and deleting all information that could possibly be linked to any opinion they might have about the protest movement. I think that obviously for people who are more likely to engage in protest or in one form or another, it's also had quite a strong effect, because of course, it's not only about people's ability to engage in protest marches and demonstrations, but things like singing protest songs or holding banners, even holding a blank piece of paper, is now considered to be a possible breach of the law here in Hong Kong. And I think that impact has been quite serious and has changed in some ways changed the culture of Hong Kong, where protest had been a very regular and routine part of daily life. Now everyone who has to think twice before they make a decision about whether they want to take the risk of protesting one thing or another.
La Svizzera e la Cina hanno una relazione molto lunga e stabile, segnata anche da importanti accordi commerciali. Come può il nostro paese e altri paesi con la stessa situazione fare pressione sulla Cina, se anche questo fosse possibile?
Well, I think we have to work under the assumption that international pressure is essential if there's going to be any hope of changing the direction here of the way things are going here in Hong Kong or China more generally. Of course, it's important for countries like Switzerland to use their bilateral relationships with China to raise a whole range of human rights issues and concerns. But it's also important for China to be hearing these same messages from a much broader array of countries and much broader array of voices. And I think one of the things that Switzerland and other countries can also do in this respect is to work to build new coalitions and broader coalitions to raise human rights concerns with China, particularly in the context of multilateral institutions and mechanisms like the ones at the UN. It's really important that China's participation in the UN and the human rights institutions be tied to its behavior, and that other countries hold China accountable for the actions that it's taking in Hong Kong and elsewhere in the country. And I think that the most effective way that we're going to be able to hold China accountable in that respect is to make sure that China is hearing the broadest possible group of voices that there is, so that it is not able to simply deflect the criticism that it hears about its policies and the things that it's doing from what it sees as the usual suspects. This has to be much broader than that.